Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the space station New Geneva, watching the stars like he had done every morning for the past 3 years. The coffee in his metal cup was cold, but he didn't notice. Something was wrong with the sky today. The first sign came from the long-range sensors. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez ran into the command center, her face pale and her hands shaking as she held the data pad. "Admiral, we're picking up massive energy signatures at the edge of the system," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The computers can't count them all." Jake set down his coffee and walked to the main display screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Hundreds of ships were appearing out of nowhere, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, like a dark cloud spreading across space. "Get me Captain Ryan Torres on the Liberty's Edge," Jake ordered, "and wake up Dr. Lisa Campbell. Tell her we need her in the command center right now." Within minutes, Ryan's face appeared on the communication screen. His ship was patrolling the outer system, and he had a clear view of the approaching fleet. "Jake, these things are huge," Ryan said, his voice crackling through the speaker. "The smallest one is twice the size of our biggest battleship, and there are thousands of them." Dr. Lisa Campbell arrived in the command center still wearing her lab coat. She was the best scientist on the station, and Jake needed her sharp mind to figure out what they were dealing with. "Are they responding to our communication attempts?" Lisa asked, pushing her glasses up her nose as she studied the sensor data. "Nothing yet," Amy replied. "But they're not attacking either. They're just waiting." The fleet had stopped at the edge of the solar system, arranged in a perfect sphere around the sun. Every ship was identical, dark metal with strange blue lights running along their sides. They sat there in silence for 6 hours before anything happened. When the message finally came, it wasn't through normal radio waves. Instead, the alien signal went straight into every computer system humanity had. Every screen on every ship and station showed the same thing at the same time. The creature that appeared on the screens was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. It wore what looked like armor made of the same dark metal as the ships. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though its mouth barely moved. "I am Ambassador Kethavar of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien said. Its voice was cold and empty, like wind through a cave. "We bring greetings to the primitive species of the system." Jake felt his jaw clench at the word primitive, but he kept listening. "The Zephyrian Empire rules over 3,000 star systems," the ambassador continued. "We have brought peace and order to countless worlds. Today, we extend that same gift to you." The screen changed to show images of other worlds, other species. Jake saw cities that stretched across entire continents, ships that made the Zephyrian fleet look small, creatures with technology that seemed like magic. All of them were kneeling before Zephyrian rulers. "These races fought us at first," Ambassador Kethavar said. "They learned that resistance is pointless. We offer you the chance to learn this lesson without bloodshed." The images disappeared and the ambassador's face returned to the screen. "You have 7 of your rotations to decide. Submit to the Empire, and your people will be allowed to live under our protection. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why 3,000 worlds chose wisdom over pride." The communication ended, leaving the command center in complete silence. Lisa was the first to speak. "Did you see those other species? Some of them had technology we can only dream of. Ships that could travel between galaxies, weapons that could destroy stars, and they all surrendered." "Maybe they were smart," Amy said quietly. "Look at our fleet compared to theirs. We have maybe 100 ships in the entire system. They brought thousands." Jake walked to the window and looked out at the alien fleet. Each ship was a dark spot against the stars, blocking out the light like a swarm of metal insects. He thought about Earth, about the colonies, about the billions of people who were counting on him to make the right choice. "Get me a direct line to President Katie Sullivan on Earth," he said. "And patch in all the colony governors and fleet commanders. We need to make a decision." The next few hours were filled with arguments and debates. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight even though the odds were hopeless. President Sullivan listened to everyone, her face calm but her eyes worried. Finally, she spoke. "I've heard all the arguments. I've seen the numbers. I know what the smart choice is supposed to be. She paused, looking directly at Jake through the screen. But I also know what kind of people we are. We don't bow to anyone. What are your orders, Madam President? Jake asked. Katie Sullivan's face hardened, and Jake saw something in her eyes that reminded him why he had always respected her. It was the same look his grandfather had when he told stories about the old wars on Earth. Send them our answer, she said. Tell them our warning is simple. Run. Jake nodded and turned to Amy. Open a channel to the Zephyrian fleet, all frequencies. When the connection was established, Jake looked directly into the camera. He thought about all the humans who would hear this message, about the children who might never grow up, about the future that hung in the balance. Ambassador Kethvar, he said, his voice steady and clear. Humanity has considered your offer. Our answer is no. We will not submit to your empire. We will not kneel to your rule. And we give you one warning in return. Run. The message was sent across space to the waiting fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Ambassador Kethavar's face appeared on their screens again. This time, the alien looked almost amused. Your species lacks wisdom, he said. We have conquered beings with power beyond your understanding. You threaten us with ships made of metal and weapons that throw pieces of rock. This will be remembered as the shortest war in galactic history. The communication ended and the Zephyrian fleet began to move toward Earth. Fleet Commander Zarthul stood in the center of his command ship, watching the holographic display that showed the human solar system. His 6 arms moved across the control panels as he studied the primitive species that had dared to threaten the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Commander, said his tactical officer, we have completed our scan of their military capabilities. The results are amusing. Zarthul's large eyes focused on the data streaming across his display. The humans had less than 200 warships in their entire system. Their weapons were chemical explosives and simple energy beams. Their ships moved using controlled explosions that pushed them through space like crude rockets. They still use nuclear fission for power, another officer reported, his voice filled with disbelief. Their computers are made of silicon and metal. They communicate using radio waves. Zarthul made a sound that was the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter. In his 300 years of military service, he had conquered 47 different species. Even the weakest of them had possessed technology far beyond what these humans could imagine. Have we encountered anything this primitive before? He asked his staff. No, Commander, replied his science officer. The Korthak used fusion power when we found them 2 centuries ago. The Villani had quantum computers. Even the insect-like Praktal possessed energy shields. These humans are barely above the level of stone tools. On the planet Earth below, Colonel Matt Harrison was having a very different conversation. He stood in an underground bunker beneath the city of Denver, surrounded by maps and computer screens showing troop movements across the planet. How long do we have? Asked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, who had been transferred to Earth Command after the first contact. Intelligence says maybe 2 weeks before they reach Earth, Matt replied. But they'll hit our outer colonies first. Mars, Europa, the mining stations. Amy looked at the numbers on her screen. 3 million soldiers in the entire Earth Defense Force, spread across dozens of worlds. The aliens had brought ships that could carry millions of troops each. We need to start the evacuation plans, she said. Already started, Matt said. But we're not just running away. President Sullivan has approved Operation Hornet's Nest. Amy had never heard of that operation. What is it? Matt smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. If they want to take our worlds, they're going to pay for every inch. We're leaving surprises behind for our new visitors. Meanwhile, in a secret laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Peter Nelson was working on projects that had been theoretical just days ago. The government had given him unlimited resources and told him to create weapons that could hurt ships, the size of cities. The problem is scale, he explained to his assistant, Dr. Karen White. Their ships are so big that our biggest missiles would be like throwing stones at a mountain. What about the experimental projects? Karen asked. The ones the military said were too dangerous to test? Peter looked at the classified files on his computer. There were weapons in there that could crack planets, devices that could tear holes in space itself, bombs that could turn matter into pure energy, the kind of things that civilized species avoided because they were too unpredictable. Maybe it's time to find out just how dangerous they really are, he said. Back on the Zephyrian command ship, Fleet Commander Zarthul was planning the invasion, with the same methods that had worked on 3,000 other worlds. First, they would destroy the military installations from orbit. Then they would land troops to secure the major population centers. Within a week, the humans would surrender, just like everyone else. "Commander," his communication officer announced, "we are receiving multiple transmissions from the human colonies. They appear to be requests for help." Zarthul examined the intercepted messages. Human colonies throughout the system were sending desperate calls to Earth, begging for reinforcements that would never come. Some were trying to evacuate their populations. Others were broadcasting surrender offers, hoping to avoid destruction. Standard behavior, Zarthul noted. Fear makes them predictable. Begin with the outer colonies. Destroy their orbital defenses and demand surrender. Make examples of those who resist. But as the Zephyrian fleet moved toward the first human colony on Mars, they had no idea what they were really facing. The humans weren't just afraid. They were angry. On Mars Colony 7, Captain Steve Parker was addressing his small garrison of 300 soldiers. They were outnumbered by thousands to one, but none of them were talking about surrender. "They think we're primitives," Steve told his troops. "They think we'll roll over and give up like every other species they've conquered. They're about to learn something about humans that isn't in their database." Private Tony Mitchell raised his hand. "What's that, sir?" Steve looked out at the red Martian landscape, where his people had built a home from nothing but rock and determination. They're about to learn that humans are really, really good at making other people regret their life choices. The first Zephyrian attack ships entered Mars orbit that evening. They sent the standard surrender demand, expecting immediate compliance. Instead, they received a response that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. "This is Captain Steve Parker of the Mars Defense Force," came the transmission. "We have your surrender demand. Our response is simple: come and take it." The Zephyrian ships opened fire on the military installations, expecting to see white flags raised within hours. Instead, the humans dug deeper into their bunkers and started shooting back with everything they had. What the aliens didn't know was that humans had been preparing for this moment since they first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Every colony had hidden weapons. Every settlement had secret bunkers. Every human had grown up hearing stories about what their ancestors did when faced with impossible odds. The Zephyrians had conquered 3,000 worlds, but they had never fought a species that had spent its entire history at war with itself. They had never faced beings who saw a fight they couldn't win and decided to fight anyway, just to make their enemies hurt. As the first battles began on Mars, Fleet Commander Zarthul still believed this would be the shortest war in galactic history. He was right about one thing: it would be remembered forever, but not for the reasons he expected. The first real battle happened on Mars Colony 7, and it didn't go the way Fleet Commander Zarthul expected. Captain Steve Parker watched from his underground command bunker as 10,000 Zephyrian troops landed outside the colony. Their ships were sleek and silent, carrying soldiers in shining armor that could stop any weapon the humans possessed. The aliens moved in perfect formation, their energy weapons glowing blue in the thin Martian air. "They're beautiful," whispered Private Tony Mitchell, looking through the periscope. "Like something from a dream." "Nightmares are dreams too," Steve replied, checking his rifle. "Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to make them remember us." The Zephyrian commander, General Vextai, had conquered 43 worlds. He expected the humans to surrender when they saw his overwhelming force. Instead, he received a message from the colony. "General, this is Captain Parker. We see your army. Very impressive. We have a counter-offer for you." "Speak," General Vextai replied, curious about what these primitives could possibly offer. "Leave now, and we promise to make your death quick when we find you." General Vextai had never received such a response. On every other world, the local defenders either surrendered immediately or asked for terms. These humans were actually threatening him. "You have 300 soldiers," he transmitted back. "I have 10,000. Your weapons cannot penetrate our armor. Your position cannot be defended. Surrender now." Steve Parker's response was to open fire. What happened next surprised everyone, including the humans. The Zephyrian energy weapons were designed to kill cleanly and efficiently. They made small holes in their targets and shut down biological functions instantly. It was civilized warfare. Human weapons were not civilized. When Tony Mitchell fired his rocket launcher at a group of alien soldiers, it didn't just kill them. It threw their bodies 50 feet through the air and left a crater in the ground. The explosion shattered windows in nearby buildings and sent shrapnel flying in all directions. "By the void," General Vextai whispered, watching his soldiers get torn apart by weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum destruction. What kind of beings are these? The battle for Mars Colony 7 lasted 6 weeks. The Zephyrians had expected it to be over in 6 hours. Every day they lost more soldiers to humans who fought like cornered animals. The defenders used tactics that made no military sense. When the aliens surrounded Building 7, the humans inside didn't surrender. They collapsed the entire structure on top of themselves, taking 50 alien soldiers with them. When the Zephyrians tried to use their advanced sensors to find hidden human positions, the humans started wearing the bodies of dead aliens as camouflage. Major Claire Foster arrived on Mars during the 3rd week of fighting, leading a relief force of 200 Marines. She had studied the alien technology and discovered something important. "Their energy weapons are too clean," she explained to Steve over the radio. "They're designed to disable, not destroy. They've never fought anyone who keeps fighting after being shot." "What do you mean?" Steve asked, ducking as alien fire blasted chunks out of the wall above his head. "Watch this," Claire said. She stepped out of cover and let an alien energy beam hit her in the chest. The weapon was designed to shut down her nervous system and make her collapse. Instead, Claire gritted her teeth, stayed on her feet, and shot the alien soldier with her shotgun. The Zephyrian trooper had never seen anything like it. His weapon had hit the human directly, but she was still fighting. It was impossible. It wasn't impossible. It was just human. Claire had been hit by the alien weapon, and it hurt worse than anything she had ever felt. But humans had been dealing with pain for millions of years. They had learned to keep fighting even when their bodies wanted to quit. The real breakthrough came when Sergeant Tom Bradley led a team into the alien supply depot. The Zephyrians had never considered the possibility that enemies might steal their equipment, so they didn't guard it very well. "Look at this stuff," Tom said, examining an alien supply truck. "It's all automated. The whole thing runs on computer programs." Dr. Rachel Bennett, who had been studying captured alien technology, made a discovery that changed everything. She was working in her makeshift lab when she realized what the aliens had never considered. "They've never fought anyone unpredictable," she told Admiral Jake Morrison over the communication link. "Their computers are programmed to fight logical enemies. Everything they do follows patterns." "What kind of patterns?" Jake asked. "Military patterns, strategic patterns, civilized patterns." Rachel pulled up the data on her screen. "Jake, they've been fighting the same war for thousands of years. They land troops, establish control points, secure resources, wait for surrender. It's like a dance they've done so many times they don't even think about it." "And we're not dancing," Jake said, understanding immediately. "We're not even hearing the music," Rachel confirmed. The proof came when Private Tony Mitchell did something that no Zephyrian computer could have predicted. He stole an alien supply shuttle, flew it straight to their command ship, and walked aboard wearing a stolen uniform. The ship's security systems were designed to detect weapons, energy signatures, and hostile intentions. They were not designed to detect a human carrying a backpack full of homemade explosives who was planning to blow himself up just to hurt his enemies. Tony made it all the way to the ship's reactor core before anyone realized he didn't belong there. When the Zephyrian guards finally stopped him, he was already connecting wires to the main power system. "What are you doing?" demanded the alien security chief. Tony looked up at the tall, gray figure and smiled. "Teaching you why you should have listened when we told you to run. The explosion that followed destroyed the command ship and took out 3 other vessels in the fleet. It also killed Tony Mitchell, but he had known that would happen when he started his mission. The news of Tony's attack spread through both human and alien forces. For the humans, it was proof that they could hurt their enemies. For the Zephyrians, it was the first time in centuries that someone had voluntarily died just to kill them. General Vextai finally took Mars Colony 7 after 6 weeks of fighting. Of the 300 human defenders, only 12 were still alive. But those 6 weeks had cost him 4,000 soldiers and shown him something that frightened him. Humans didn't fight to win battles. They fought to make sure their enemies lost them. Fleet Commander Zarthul received General Vextai's report with growing concern. The conquest of a single small colony had taken longer than the invasion of entire star systems. And this was just the beginning. There were hundreds of human colonies scattered throughout their space, and if they all fought like Mars Colony 7, this war was going to be very different from what he had planned. Fleet Commander Zarthul stared at the casualty reports with all 6 of his eyes. In 3 months of fighting, he had lost more soldiers than in the previous 50 years of conquest combined. The humans were fighting back on every world, and each battle cost him dearly. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "the humans have destroyed another supply convoy. They used civilian mining ships loaded with explosives. The attack made no strategic sense, but it killed 3,000 of our troops." Zarthul's claws clicked against his command console. These humans fought like they were insane. They threw away their lives for tiny victories that meant nothing in the larger war. It was wasteful and illogical, but it was also effective. "Activate the planet killers," he ordered. "Target the agricultural world Haven's Rest. 2 million human civilians live there. When they see what happens to those who resist us, the other colonies will surrender." His officers exchanged glances. The Empire rarely used world-destroying weapons. Most species surrendered long before such measures became necessary. "Are you certain, Commander?" asked his science officer. "The destruction of Haven's Rest will be visible from Earth. It may not discourage them as intended." "Do it," Zarthul said. "These primitives need to learn that resistance has consequences." The Planet Killer was a massive ship designed for one purpose. It moved slowly toward Haven's Rest, while the human colonists tried desperately to evacuate. Most of the transport ships had already been destroyed in earlier battles, so millions of people were trapped on the surface. Governor Linda Hayes stood in the planetary command center, watching the alien weapon approach on her screens. She could have fled on the last evacuation ship, but she chose to stay with her people. "This is Governor Hayes of Haven's Rest," she broadcast on all frequencies. "To anyone listening, we want you to know that we are not afraid. We chose to build our lives here among the stars, and we choose to end them here if we must. Remember us." The Planet Killer fired its weapon. Haven's Rest died in minutes, turned from a green world full of farms and cities into a ball of molten rock. The light from its destruction could be seen from dozens of nearby systems. Admiral Jake Morrison received the news aboard the space station New Geneva. He had expected the aliens to escalate, but seeing an entire world murdered still hit him like a physical blow. 2 million people, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez said, her voice hollow. "They killed 2 million civilians just to send us a message." Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about all the human worlds that were still out there, still fighting. "Then we better make sure they get our message back." He activated the emergency communication system that connected every human military unit in space. His voice reached thousands of ships and millions of soldiers across dozens of star systems. "This is Admiral Morrison. You've all seen what happened to Haven's Rest. The aliens think that killing our civilians will make us surrender. They're wrong. As of this moment, we are no longer fighting to defend our territory. We are fighting to make sure these monsters never threaten anyone again." The response was immediate. Every human ship, from massive battle cruisers to tiny patrol boats, began moving toward alien positions. They weren't retreating anymore. They were attacking. Captain Susan Kelly commanded a small fleet of converted civilian vessels near the Centauri system. Her ships were mining barges, cargo haulers, and passenger liners that had been fitted with whatever weapons they could carry. "Susan, this is insane," her second-in-command said over the radio. "We're flying cargo ships against alien warships. We can't win this fight." "We're not trying to win," Susan replied, watching the massive Zephyrian supply fleet on her screens. "We're trying to hurt them so badly they'll remember it forever." Her fleet of 30 civilian ships charged straight at the 200 alien vessels. The Zephyrians opened fire immediately, destroying human ships with every shot. But the humans kept coming. When Susan's ship was hit and started to burn, she didn't try to escape. Instead, she aimed her crippled vessel at the largest alien supply ship and pushed her engines to maximum power. The collision destroyed both vessels and damaged 3 others. Lieutenant Commander Aaron Brooks was developing new battle tactics in his underground command center on Earth. The military had given him access to every computer and every piece of intelligence they had gathered about the aliens. "The problem is that we're fighting their kind of war," he explained to his staff. "We're trying to use strategy and tactics that make sense. But what if we stopped making sense?" "What do you mean?" asked his assistant, Captain Mike Turner. Aaron pulled up a holographic display showing human and alien fleet positions throughout the galaxy. "What if we attacked places that had no military value? What if we defended positions that were worthless? What if we made them fight battles that served no purpose except to kill their soldiers?" "That's not how wars are supposed to work," Mike said. "Exactly," Aaron replied. "They've been fighting wars the right way for thousands of years. They know how to counter every logical strategy. But they don't know how to fight people who are willing to lose everything just to make them bleed." Dr. Kevin White was working on a different kind of problem in his laboratory. The government had asked him to create weapons that could damage alien technology, but everything he tried failed against their advanced defenses. "Their systems are too sophisticated," he told his research team. "They can counter any logical attack. Their computers can predict any reasonable strategy." "What about unreasonable strategies?" asked Dr. Sarah Johnson. "What if we created weapons that didn't work the way they were supposed to?" Kevin looked at her with new interest. "Weapons that malfunction?" "Weapons that malfunction in useful ways," Sarah clarified. "Computer viruses that don't follow programming logic. Bombs that explode at random times. Ships that fly in patterns that make no mathematical sense." Kevin smiled for the first time in weeks. "Chaos theory warfare, I like it." Within days, human forces throughout the galaxy began implementing what became known as the Madness Protocol. Human ships would attack alien positions and then retreat for no apparent reason. Human ground forces would defend empty buildings while abandoning strategic locations. Human computer viruses would infect alien systems and then do nothing except play human music. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that broke every rule of warfare they understood. Their battle computers, designed to predict logical behavior, couldn't cope with opponents who did things that made no sense. Fleet Commander Zarthul watched his carefully planned invasion turn into chaos. Human forces seemed to be everywhere, and nowhere at once. They would fight desperately for worthless positions while giving up important ones without a battle. They attacked his strongest points and ignored his weakest. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "human forces have captured Outpost 7. They lost 800 soldiers to take a supply depot that contained nothing but food and basic ammunition." "Why?" Zarthul demanded. "What strategic value does it have?" "None, sir. But they're broadcasting from there now. They're telling other human forces that they won a victory." Zarthul realized that these humans weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for something he didn't understand. They were fighting to prove that they could fight, even when it made no sense. The war that was supposed to. Last days had now been going on for 6 months. Zarthul's forces controlled most of human space, but they were bleeding soldiers every day. And somehow, despite losing every major battle, the humans seemed to be getting stronger. Looking at his casualty reports, Zarthul began to wonder if these primitives had been trying to warn him about something after all. The final battle began when Fleet Commander Zarthul brought his entire reserve fleet to the Sol system. 100,000 Zephyrian warships surrounded Earth like a metal storm, blotting out the stars. It was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled in one place. "This ends today," Zarthul announced to his commanders. "Every human ship will be destroyed. Every human world will surrender. We will show the galaxy what happens to species that defy the Empire." Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the rebuilt space station New Geneva, looking at the alien armada through the reinforced windows. Humanity had fewer than 5,000 ships left, most of them damaged from months of fighting. By every rule of warfare, the battle was already over. "Jake," Captain Ryan Torres called from the Liberty's edge. "We're detecting massive energy buildups throughout their fleet. They're preparing to destroy everything at once." "Good," Jake replied, surprising everyone on the communication channel. "Let them bunch up nice and tight." Dr. Lisa Campbell was working frantically in her laboratory aboard New Geneva. After months of studying Zephyrian biology, she had finally found their weakness. It wasn't in their technology or their tactics. It was in their minds. "Their brains work like computers," she explained over the intercom to Jake. "Everything they do follows logical patterns. But that also means they can't handle information that doesn't make sense." "What kind of information?" Jake asked. "Chaos," Lisa replied. "Pure, random chaos. I've created a biological virus that attacks their neural pathways, but only when they try to process illogical data. The more confused they get, the more damage it does." Meanwhile, Colonel Matt Harrison was leading the ground defense of Earth. Zephyrian landing craft were touching down in every major city, disgorging thousands of alien soldiers, but this time the humans were ready for them. "Remember," Matt told his troops over the radio, "we're not trying to win. We're trying to teach them a lesson they'll never forget." The battle for New York became legend when the aliens surrounded the city. The humans didn't defend the bridges or the tunnels like any logical military force would. Instead, they collapsed every building over 3 stories tall, turning the entire city into a maze of rubble and debris. The Zephyrian soldiers found themselves fighting in conditions they had never trained for. Their energy weapons were designed for clean battlefield combat, not close-quarters fighting in collapsed buildings. Their armor was too heavy for climbing over debris. Their communication systems couldn't work through all the metal and concrete. Captain Steve Parker, who had survived the battle for Mars, led a team of volunteers into the alien command center in Times Square. They didn't try to capture it or destroy it. Instead, they did something the aliens never expected. "We surrender," Steve announced, walking into the command post with his hands raised. The Zephyrian commander, General Kexmol, was confused but pleased. Finally, these humans were showing some sense. "You are wise to surrender," the general said. "Your species will be treated fairly under Empire rule." "Oh, we're not surrendering for real," Steve said, pulling the pins from 6 grenades hidden in his jacket. "We're surrendering so we could get close enough to kill you." The explosion destroyed the command center and everyone inside it, including Steve and his team. It also sent a message to every human and alien in the city. Humans would rather die than live under alien rule. In space, the main battle was reaching its climax. The Zephyrian fleet had formed perfect attack formations, their ships arranged in geometric patterns that maximized their firepower. It was a thing of beauty, a masterpiece of military engineering. Lieutenant Commander Aaron Brooks was coordinating the human response from his command ship. He looked at the alien formations and smiled. "All ships," he broadcast, "execute Chaos Protocol 7. What happened next violated every principle of space warfare. Human ships began flying in random directions, firing at random targets, and performing maneuvers that served no tactical purpose. Some ships flew straight at the alien formations while others retreated for no reason. A few started spinning end over end while firing in all directions. The Zephyrian battle computers tried desperately to analyze the human attack patterns, but there were no patterns to analyze. The humans were fighting like they had lost their minds. "What are they doing?" Zarthul demanded, watching his tactical displays fill with chaos. "Unknown, Commander," his tactical officer replied. "Their movements make no strategic sense. Our Computers cannot predict their next actions because they appear to be random. That was when Dr. Lisa Campbell's biological weapon began to take effect. The virus had been loaded into every human weapon, and each time a Zephyrian ship was hit, the alien crew was exposed to it. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the confusion started. Zephyrian ship commanders found themselves unable to think clearly. Simple decisions became impossible. Battle formations fell apart as ship captains forgot their orders or became paralyzed by indecision. Sergeant Tony Mitchell's younger brother, Corporal Danny Mitchell, had infiltrated the alien flagship using the same method Tony had pioneered. But instead of trying to destroy the ship, Danny had a different plan. He made his way to the ship's main computer core and plugged in a device that Dr. Kevin White had created. It was a chaos generator, a machine that produced completely random data and fed it directly into the alien computer systems. The Zephyrian flagship's computer tried to process the random information, but it couldn't make sense of data that had no meaning. The confusion spread through the ship's network, infecting every system. Soon the massive vessel was flying in circles while its weapons fired at empty space. Fleet Commander Zarthol felt his mind beginning to fog as the biological virus took hold. Through the growing confusion, he realized what was happening. These humans hadn't been fighting to win. They had been fighting to drive him insane. "Retreat," he managed to order. "All ships, retreat immediately." But many of his ship commanders were too confused to understand the order. Some ships tried to retreat while others continued attacking. Several vessels collided with each other as their navigation systems failed. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet fall apart and felt no satisfaction. Too many humans had died to reach this moment. But as he saw the surviving Zephyrian ships fleeing the solar system, he knew the sacrifice had not been in vain. "This is Admiral Morrison to all human forces," he broadcast. "The enemy is retreating, but do not pursue them. Let them go back to their empire and tell them what they learned here." President Katie Sullivan appeared on the communication screen, her face tired but determined. "What message should we send with them?" she asked. Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about all the other species out there who might one day face the same choice humanity had faced. "Tell them we kept our promise," he said. "We warned them to run. We hope the rest of the galaxy listens better than they did." Fleet Commander Zarthul managed to escape with less than half his fleet. As his mind slowly cleared from the effects of the human virus, he understood something that would haunt him forever. The humans had never been trying to defeat the Empire. They had been trying to teach the Empire to fear them, and they had succeeded. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through the galaxy for generations. The Zephyrian Empire had learned that some species were too dangerous to conquer, too unpredictable to control, and too stubborn to break. Humanity had earned something that money could not buy and weapons could not win: the respect of their enemies, and the fear of those who would threaten them. The galaxy was a little bit safer and a lot more careful about who they chose to fight.